Skylanders has 10 elements, and in this video, I'm going to be ranking every single one of them from my least favorite to my favorite in terms of the Skylanders that are in each. Everyone has their own favorites, and this is just my personal opinion. But without farther ado, let's get right into it. I don't think it's too big of a shock that Dark is going to come in 10th place. Light and Dark, of course, had less Skylanders than all 8 of the original elements, so they're immediately at a disadvantage. But Dark only has a couple standout Skylanders with Nightmare and Starcast, and I think Starcast is the best Dark Skylander by far. Nightfall was pretty disappointing for me. Hoodsicle just isn't one of my favorites, and Blackout is decent, he's fine, but he does have some slight issues that really hold him back for me. Dark doesn't have a ton going for it, and just, of course, it not having nearly as many Skylanders as the other elements is a big drawback as well. And even in the later games after Trap Team, it still was handicapped with the amount of total Skylanders that were in it. Dark, while it does have one really good Skylander with Starcast, and it has a pretty fun one with Nightmare, it just isn't the best element overall, which is going to give it last place on my list. Now in 9th place is Light. I will say 10th and 9th place were pretty close between Light and Dark. They could almost be interchangeable, but Light just has some slightly better Skylanders. Blastertron, I'd say, is around the same level as Starcast. They're both really good, but then there's also Nightlight, who's a big fan favorite, and Spotlight, who I personally don't have, but I know a lot of people really like Spotlight. And then Aurora, I actually like a little bit more than Hoodsicle. And then, of course, Astral Blast is a little bit better than Nightfall, giving Light a little bit of an edge over Dark, which is going to give it one spot higher on the list, although it's still handicapped by only having 5 Skylanders compared to the above 10 that all the other elements had. Now, when we get to 8th place, it becomes a lot more competitive with the elements because they all have a bunch of Skylanders, but my 8th place is going to have to be Magic. I think this actually isn't that hot of a take. I think a lot of people don't really like Magic that much. I think the roster is fine, but I think all the other elements really just do it better. Magic has some standout Skylanders like Voodoo and Pop Fizz and Enigma and Pinata, but beyond that, there aren't that many too crazy Skylanders in the Magic element. I think all of Superchargers isn't that exciting. I think the Swappers aren't too exciting. Of course, Blastermind, a lot of people don't really like him. There's a lot that isn't too great when it comes to the Magic element, but of course there's still a lot of good in it. Pinata is absolutely awesome. Enigma has such a cool design, one of the coolest designs ever, and I absolutely love his moveset as well. Voodoo is one of my favorite out of the original 32, and Pop Fizz sort of was one of the most complex Skylanders when he came out, and a lot of people still love him to this day. Magic added a lot to the franchise, and of course it does have Spyro, but it does have some flaws and drawbacks that keeps it from being any higher on this list. Now 7th place actually might be a shock, but for me this is going to be the life element. There are a lot of good Skylanders in this one, like Zook, Stump Smash, T-Rex, Bumble Blast, or Chompy Mage, but at the same time a lot of them don't really feel like they do anything that amazing, that special. While a lot of them are pretty iconic, like Stealth Elf or T-Rex, a lot of them at the same time just feel kind of forgotten and kind of left behind. Like, how often are you really going to be talking about Tough Luck or Zulu or Boom Bloom? There's a lot of Skylanders who I feel like are pretty forgotten in the life element, and I wouldn't even use the term forgotten. I would more so say they just aren't very impressive, and thus many people just don't end up talking about them much because there isn't that much to talk about. I will say though, the life element does have some of the best Skylanders ever. Chompy Mage is absolutely amazing, as well as Bumble Blast, and of course T-Rex. I mean, you could talk about how awesome T-Rex is all day, every day. T-Rex is just such an awesome Skylander, and that's gonna get the life element the 7th spot on this list. And then in 6th place, this might be actually a hot take, but I have the water element. At this point on, the elements become very close and it becomes very difficult to rank. Pretty much all the top 6 are at least somewhat interchangeable because they're all great elements, but I have water. Personally, I think there's some great Skylanders in this. You got Gilgrunt, Slam Bam, Freeze Blade. I personally love Riptide. Snapshot is super awesome. Tidepool is a fantastic Skylander, but then there's just a lot of ones that sort of just sit in the background and they just don't do too much for me. Thumpback's great, Chill's great, Whamshell's great, but I don't think they're going to hit the highs as someone like Gilgrunt and Snapshot. They're just not as good personally. I'm not a huge fan of Lobstar. There's just a few Skylanders in these elements that just don't quite live up to some of the other ones, and that's going to get it sort of in the middle of this list. I just think there's some other elements that do a lot better, but Water still does pretty fantastic. It has a lot of my favorite Skylanders in it. I absolutely love Gilgrunt. Snapshot is amazing too. Tidepool is one of the best Skylanders out there, and I think Freeze Blade was probably my most hyped Skylander when I was actually getting them when the games came out when I was a lot younger. Freezeblade, I remember seeing him. He has one of the coolest designs, and I want to get him so bad, and he did not disappoint, which is going to get Water the 6th place on this list. And then the top 5 are even harder to rank, but in 5th place, I'm going to have Undead. Some of the standouts are Chop Chop, Night Shift, Grim Creeper, Shortcut, Crypt King, Bone Bash Rollerball, and Pit Boss, and I could go on. There are so many standout Skylanders in the Undead element. It's such a cool element that has so many great Skylanders that are it's really prominent in like every single game, and just the theming of Undead creates some of the best designs and the coolest movesets out there, because there's always sort of some kind of ghost or skeletal or zombie theming on all of these Skylanders that just makes them awesome. This is a really cool theme, and it's really accentuated by Skylanders like Chop Chop and Night Shift and Bone Bash Rollerball, who just have these awesome moves, awesome attacks that I absolutely love, and it gets Undead pretty high. I've always thought that Undead was one of my favorite elements, but doing this list, I realized just how tough the competition was, which ends up with having Undead in the 5th spot on this list. I hope you guys can understand that, as I do know Undead is one of the more fan favorite elements, but for me, it's gonna have to be 5th place. There's 4 elements that are just a little bit better than it. And one of my hottest takes from this video is probably gonna be saying that Tech is only the 4th best element. Most people have this as their favorite element. I think this is hands down the most common element for people to say is their favorite. Tech is a super beloved element, and I can see why. There's a lot of amazing Skylanders. You've got Trigger Happy, you've got Drobot, Spyrise, Magna Charge, Gear Shift, Chopper, High Volt, Robo. You got Chain Reaction, one of the best Skylanders of all time. There's so much that Tech offers, and it's so awesome. The Tech element is so great. There's a few that I like more. There's only 3 elements that I think are better than Tech, but Tech does so well across literally every single game in the franchise. I think there's always a great Tech Skylander, which is awesome to see, and there's so much variety as far as we can get out of their movesets. You can get explosives with Skylanders like Countdown, you can get gears with Skylanders like Gear Shift or Chain Reaction, you can get electricity out of Skylanders. Once again, Chain Reaction has a massive lightning strike. There's so much you can get out of Tech element. Also lasers, Skylanders like Robo and Drobot, you get these laser blasts, which are super cool. Tech has so much going for it, so much uniqueness, and so much diversity in the rosters, which I absolutely love to see, and Tech Skylanders are some of the most fun to use. In 3rd place, this is going to be probably another shocker for a lot of you, because I know a lot of you don't actually like this element that much, and that's going to be the air element. A lot of people seem to not like air at all, but personally, there are just so many Skylanders in the air element that I really like, such as Lightning Rod, or Free Ranger, Boom Jet, Pop Thorn, or Thunderbolt, or even Gusto, or Blades, or Stormblade, or Wildstorm. There are so many great Skylanders in the air element, and the theming is so cool. So many of them have electricity and tornadoes and wind gusts. There's a lot you can get out of the air element that makes all the Skylanders feel really cool, like Lightning Rod. In what other element are you going to see this gigantic, like almost Zeus looking being shoot a gigantic lightning bolt from the sky down on the enemies? It is so sick to see. So many of the air Skylanders take advantage of stuff like that, like Thunderbolt can just make a massive tornado of lightning in all different directions. Air has so much to offer. Even Skylanders like Scratch that I don't personally have, I've only heard of them in high regard, so I would still say air is a phenomenal element. I love so many of the Skylanders from it. There's only a few that I don't like Tornado, I'm not a big fan of, but other than that, the air element is absolutely awesome. And in 2nd place, I actually have the earth element. This might be another shocker, because I've heard a decent amount of people say that air and earth are their least favorite duo of elements, but personally, they're my favorite duo of elements. I absolutely love Earth as well. Skylanders like Dino Rang and Prism Breaker, absolutely amazing. Crusher has been one of my favorite Skylanders of all time for so long at this point. Flashwing adds so much diversity and is such a cool and fun Skylander to use. Doomstone has a ton of cool gimmicks in his moveset that I absolutely love. Scorp has such a unique design and theming. He has speed and fun attacks to use. Wallop is just so OP. Fist Bump is super OP, but he's also super fun to use. Rocky Roll is one of the most fun and intricately designed Skylanders out there, and he's also effective in combat. And then there's the senseis like Golden Queen and Barbella and Tri-Tip, who I love all 3 of them. Earth has so much going for it, in my opinion. It's definitely one of my favorite elements out there, which is going to give it the 2nd place. This might be a hot take. I don't really know why a lot of people don't seem to like Earth that much, but personally, the theming of rocks and ground and quaking and crystals is so cool cool to me, and it's implemented so perfectly into so many Skylanders movesets and designs that just makes me love Earth so much to give it that second spot on this list. And after considering it for a long time, I have come to the realization that fire is my favorite element. I absolutely love pretty much everything about fire. I might be the slightest bit biased because orangish, reddish, yellow is sort of my favorite like gradient of colors, which of course is definitely taken advantage of by a lot of the fire Skylanders, but their movesets aren't lacking either. You've got Skylanders like Igniter and Sunburn, who's one of the best ones ever, Flameslinger, Hothead, Blast Zone, Wildfire, who's my favorite Skylander of all time. Torch is insanely OP. Spitfire has almost everything you'd want in a Skylander, and he's so fun to use. Bowser, I would say, is the best crossover Skylander ever made and has one of the most beautifully executed movesets in all of the franchise. Flarewolf has so much speed and range and attacks and firepower going for him, and Taekwon Crow is one of the most overpowered and fun senseis out there. Fire is really not lacking in any regard. I absolutely love the fire element, and I think a lot of people actually agree with me on this. I think more people are starting to come around to the fire element and realize just how awesome it is. So many of the Skylanders are just absolutely amazing, and there really aren't any in the fire element that I can think of that don't hit the highs of the best Skylanders in the fire element. There are just so many good ones. I absolutely love everything about the fire element, which easily gives it the first place. None of this video was really based on just the theming of like that substance that makes up the elements at all. Like I could have just said fire is better than water because like a burning fire is cooler than the ocean, but no, it's not based on that. It's based on really Skylanders movesets and how fun they are to use. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely leave me your opinion or your list if you would like to in the comments down below. I do like looking through them. So thank you guys once again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. So bye bye everybody, have a good one.